Okay, reconvening the Committee on Judiciary on our 3:05 p.m. agenda. We do have several bills up for hearing and decision-making today. So up first is SB 2638, SD2 HD1 relating to domestic violence, which establishes a petty misdemeanor offense of abuse of family or household member and penalties, and makes other amendments. And testifying first, and I'll note again for the record that we've had testimony in from the public and agencies and available to the committee all day today to take a look at. We have the Judiciary in support, Attorney General with comments, Public Defender opposed, Commission on the Status of Women in support, and so forth down the line as folks have been able to read, as well as a number of individual testimonies, mostly in support. So that said, just for the record, we'll be going on to the next measure, SB 2701 HD1 relating to agricultural buildings, which similarly had support from the Office of Planning, Department of Agriculture, Farm Bureau, Cattlemen's Council, and one opposition. Up next was SB 2313 relating to employment practices, which prohibits an employer from requiring an employee to enter into a non-disclosure agreement pertaining to sexual harassment. And there was supportive testimony from the Civil Rights Commission, Queens Health Systems, Planned Parenthood, AAUW Hawaii, Hawaii Women's Coalition, and others. We did have one late opposition testimony. The next measure on the agenda was SB 2329 relating to ignition interlock devices, which updates ignition interlock requirements and adds in additional penalties. We had support from the Department of Transportation, from comments from the Public Defender, both in support and opposition in part per their testimony. Support from the Office of the Prosecuting Attorney of the County of, from City and County of Honolulu, support from Smart Start, and a number of other organizations and individuals. And then on the last bill on the agenda, SB 2038, relating to board members. I'll note for the committee and for the audience, this was a proposed House Draft 1, which we had actually scheduled back in March, just as the legislature had recessed for the COVID situation. The proposed HD1 permits members, boards and commissions to operate remotely in emergency situations, and makes other conforming amendments. And we had comments from DAGS, support from OIP, from DCCA, comments from the Civil Rights Commission, and Executive Office on Aging in support, State Council on Developmental Disabilities in support, Department of Agriculture in support, and so forth. We did have opposition from the Civil Beat Center on Law, the Civil Beat Law Center for the Public Interest, and one individual. So all that being said, that is the last measure on our agenda. So why don't we recess for 3 minutes while we get our vice chair back and return for decision making. Recess. Okay, we're reconvening the Committee on Judiciary for decision-making on our 3:05 p.m. agenda. Up first is SB 2638 SD2 HD1 relating to domestic violence. Recommendation on this is to pass as an HD2, making a few amendments, limiting the options for deferrals to deferred acceptance of guilty pleas and not deferred acceptance of no contest pleas, deleting coercive control from the petty misdemeanor, inserting as part 2 the contents of HB 2057 that make consistent the types of documents accepted as proof of domestic or sexual violence victim status, but deleting sections concerning cell phone contracts pursuant to HRS 269-16.93. We're amending the 5-year sunset for the petty misdemeanor to 6/30/2026, making tech amendments, and finally inserting an effective date of January 1, 2021. Okay, so any comments on this? If not, Vice Chair.
Okay, voting on SB 2638, SD2 HD1, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Bauer. Representative Bauer, okay, excused. Representative Cragen.
Aye.
Representative Lowen.
Aye.
Representative McKelvey.
Aye.
Representative Nakashima.
Yes.
Representative Peruso.
Aye.
Representative Say.
No.
No. Representative Takayama.
Aye.
Representative Yamane.
Aye.
Representative Thielen. Representative Thielen, excused. Chair recommendation has been adopted.
Thank you. Moving to the next measure, SB 2701 HD1 relating to agricultural buildings, which grants county agencies the right to enter property to investigate ag buildings for violations of compliance. Want to move this forward as an HD2, correcting the effective date to upon approval. Any questions or comments? If not, thanks to the Chair of Waterland for working on this. Vice Chair.
Okay, voting on SB 2701 HD1, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments noting the excused absences of Representatives Bauer and Thielen. Are there any reservations? Seeing none, are there any noes? Seeing none, Chair recommendation has been adopted.
Thank you. Moving to SB 2313 SD2 HD1 relating to employment practices, which prohibits an employer from requiring an employee to enter into a non-disclosure agreement pertaining to sexual harassment or sexual assault. Recommendation is to move this forward also as an HD2 onto the Committee on Finance, correcting the effective date to upon approval. Any comments on this? If not, Vice Chair.
Okay, voting on SB 2313 SD2 HD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments noting the excused absences of Representatives Bauer and Thielen. Are there any reservations? Seeing none, are there any noes? Seeing none, Chair recommendation has been adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to the next measure, SB 2329 SD2 HD1 relating to ignition interlock devices, which establishes a system of graduated penalties for violations of ignition interlock law and updates it with new requirements. I'll note we moved a similar measure out earlier this session in the House bill. So I'd like to move this forward as an HD2, noting there's a couple of blanks which need to be filled in, which include the periods of time with which an ignition interlock device would need to be installed upon the respective violation. So we want to insert those two blanks to be 90 days and 180 days. And then finally, correct the effective date to July 2021, or July 1, 2021. So any questions or comments? If not, Vice Chair.
Okay, voting on SB 2329 SD2 HD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments noting the excused absences of Representatives Bauer and Thielen. Are there any reservations? Seeing none, are there any noes? Seeing none, Chair recommendation has been adopted.
Thank you. Moving to SB 2038 SD1 relating to board members. And I'll note again, this is the proposed House draft that we had heard today. We'd like to move this forward as an HD1, adopting the proposed draft from the Office of Information Practices. And I'll note for the record that since we last heard this measure in March, it had been proposed to allow boards and commissions and government services to continue operating through a potential COVID shutdown, allowing for remote operations. Since that time, obviously we've come a long way, but I'll note the measure is still needed as there is a challenge in the court system, which could potentially undo I think it's unlikely, but it could potentially undo the governor's emergency proclamation. And included in that proclamation is the ability for boards and commissions to operate remotely. So should that move forward, we would be stuck without a temporary fix. So this measure is a temporary fix that would allow these operations to continue and allow services to be provided to our community. So we'd like to adopt it. And also note to our neighbor island members who had suggested some amendments. In addition to adopting the proposed HD1, we would like to adopt, some of those were contained in the proposed HD1, but one which was not, which we'd like to be clear about, is that when a connection might be interrupted, if, for example, we lost everybody on the TV right here, in current law, the meeting would have to adjourn. So we want to change that to the meeting would have to recess until that connection is reset. And then finally, I'll just note that the approval date is upon approval. So any comments or questions on this?
You're going to accept OIP's other amendments to suggested testimony?
Oh, that's right. Thank you. Yeah, we'll also be accepting OIP's additional amendments, which they had provided in their written testimony on the proposed HD1. Okay. If there are no comments, Vice Chair.
Voting on SB 2038 SD1, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Noting the excused absences of Representatives Brower and Thielen, are there any reservations? Oh, Brower is available now. Sorry.
Of course.
Okay, noting the excused absence of Representative Thielen.
Pay attention.
Are there any reservations? Seeing none, are there any no's? Seeing none, Chair recommendation has been adopted.
All right. Thank you everyone for indulging us in this new committee format. Appreciate it.
Thank you.